Hello. Hello, testing. People trickling in right now, so we'll just give it a couple of minutes and then we'll start. At any point in time, if there's any question, feel free to use the chat um, system and then text your chat, type in your question. I'll see if I can answer them. Thank you. We're just waiting one more minute before we start the presentation. Today's discussion and webinar will be about COVID-19's impact on the Singapore market, as well as sharing about some of the grants and initiatives for handouts from the Monetary Authority of Singapore, and then also a brief overview about the Payment Services Act, as well as some of the other relevant uh, regimes and initiatives from the MES which are important to consider right now. Okay, in a few minutes, a few seconds, we'll start. Okay, still more people coming in. Hello, everybody. Okay, I'll start right now on the dot, and there will be people coming in. So rest assured, there will be a recording of this webinar, and there will also be a sharing of the slides if you are interested in getting them. So without further ado, let me start the presentation slides. Okay, so today's topic, thank you for joining us. I'm speaking from Singapore. Today's topic, COVID-19, the impact on the market, digital acceleration grant, and the Payment Services Act. And my name is Malcolm Tan. I have two primary entities. One is Gravitas International, which is an advisory company in this fintech space and digital asset space. And secondly, my law firm, Malcolm Tan Chambers, which is a full service law firm, but we are basically a specialist in the licensing, regulatory, and fintech space. So about myself, I'm a lawyer entrepreneur. I've got interest in many different industries and companies. And right now we are fully in the digital asset space, and we have several initiatives in this space as well, where I have an equity stake. So next slide. Okay, so today the agenda that we'll be covering will be COVID-19 and the impact on the markets, uh, MAS, which is Monetary Authority of Singapore's Digital Acceleration Grant, which I'm sure a lot of you will be interested in, especially if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner or top management. And thirdly, we'll be talking about the Payment Services Act and the MAS sandbox regime, which quite a lot of our clients are going for right now. So I'll explain a bit more and maybe answer any questions that any of you might have. So firstly, COVID-19, the impact on the markets. On the right, in the interesting infographic, which is a very recent research, these are the different types of industries where there is an impact. So if you can see the key, basically anything that is red has a severe impact. Anything that is green, which is basically only one uh, category of industry, which is trading, will be positively impacted. So over 15% increase And yellow would be basically a minimal growth or slight negative impact. So basically, you can see many of the categories like banks severely impacted, forex markets severely impacted, wealth management, investments severely impacted. Then SME lending has been slightly impacted. Some industries like consumer lending, mortgage, challenges, insurtech, and payments, there's not much of a movement due to the COVID-19. And this research shows that trading is positively impacted. I guess with everyone stuck at home, all they can do is click on the trades, and that's what will give a growth in this market. But some industry segments are severely impacted, as you can see. So what does this bring about? An interesting thing in the digital asset space is that a lot of banks, a lot of governments are actually considering the issuance of their own digital assets. Those countries like in the US, UK, several European nations, and of course China was already intending to do this, are all intending to issue their own CBDCs, central bank digital currency. So this means digital aspect or digital representation of their traditional fiat currencies. So for example, if the US issues its own CBDC, that means that there will be a digital US dollar. So you don't need a physical note. You can have a digital impression of it. So this is a quite an interesting acceleration of the market and the adoption of this. And I believe that within the next 2 years, several countries around the world, maybe the being led by two of the biggest countries, India and China, will come up with its own CBDCs. And many countries that found a difficulty in trickling down aid to their citizens, especially in this COVID-19 situation, will strongly consider the issuance of their own central bank digital assets. So why is this so? In many countries, in most countries in the world, there has been a loosening of liquidity. That means the banks and the central governments have decided to pump a lot of liquidity into the markets. And how they do this is to aid certain industries, for example, the aviation industry, for example, tourism. Why? Because if they don't put the money into these industries and help the businesses and the large enterprises, then basically the industries will uh, suffer a severe impact. A lot of companies will close down, and a lot of skilled labor will leave these companies and seek employment elsewhere, meaning that it will take years before these industries will be able to climb back on their feet. So this is one aspect of the central bank liquidity trickling down. A second and the more impacted aspect of this liquidity provisioning is that even the citizens who are viewed to be getting aid, for example, if they are in certain income groups or in certain industries or jobs, occupations which are severely impacted, and the government wants to give them this money, they can't even get this aid because the institutions which are dispensing these monies are basically not equipped to handle the volume, not equipped to handle the task. So that's why a lot of governments are now looking at going apps, going mobile, and use that as a mechanism for dispensing aid. So that's a big impact point about this COVID-19 on the markets. So there are numerous other aspects uh, where the okay, so we're interested in finding out your opinions about how your businesses are impacted. So participants in this webinar, you can key in your answers. Is your business infected by the COVID-19 situation? Yes, no, or your business is still the same, right? So yes, no, or same. Okay, so like I was saying, there are many aspects to the COVID-19 impact on the industries. Here we are narrowing this down to just the financial industry and the industry that is being governed by Singapore's central bank, the MAS. So now we'll move on to the next part of this webinar, which is the Digital Acceleration Grant, which is probably a major reason why a lot of you are tuning in. Now, this is a very nice government aid. Basically, MAS has come up with a $125 million grant. It's called the Digital Acceleration Grant, which will help its ecosystem, basically the banking and the financial ecosystem in Singapore. So what does this do? It supports Singapore-based smaller financial institutions and fintech firms. Financial institutions will be deemed or regarded as those who have licenses under the regulatory environment of MAS. Fintech firms, there are two definitions. So one is those firms that are also under the MAS umbrella. And secondly, fintech firms will be considered as full members of the Singapore Fintech Association who have obtained certification and a rubber stamp of approval from the SFA. So I'll go into that in a bit more detail later at another slide. But essentially, the nice thing about this grant is that there's $125 million available to be dispensed in a co-funding mechanism to the qualifying companies. So for example, if you're a qualifying FI, financial institution, or if you're a qualifying fintech firm, you can get up to 80% co-funding for applications submitted by next year, and then subsequently 70% co-funding. So as with every grant dispensed by Singapore, basically they will allocate a certain budget towards this, and there's a reducing pool. So 125 million there, everybody can draw it until it runs down to zero. So of course, once it runs down to zero, either the scheme will be stopped or a subsequent budget announced by Singapore will top up this amount or give additional grant support, right? So there's $125 million basically that are being dispensed right now. Funding duration is a year for institutional projects, which I'll go into. Secondly, for 2 years for industry pilots, which again, I will explain the criteria for in a subsequent slide. Now, who's eligible for this? Singapore-based financial institutions and fintech firms which are approved by MAS and SFA with not more than 200 employees. So let me see, there are some questions. Okay, there's a question. The MAS grants available to exempt firms. If you're an exempt firm and you have a license, for example, an exempt firm may be considered a VC, a VCFM, right? So the venture capital fund management company actually has some exemptions under MES, but they do have a do have a CMS license. So it's called a exempt CMS license. Then MES grant would be applicable. But if you are just one of the companies that have applied for the exemption notice under the Payment Services Act, which I think this question is angled at, then unlikely that you will be qualifying. You will need to qualify as a fintech institution, as a financial institution or as a fintech firm, which I explained earlier. Okay, so no other questions. Let me get back to the slides. Next, let me describe what are institutional projects. So basically, an institutional project in the definition under this digital acceleration grant is if you have a collaboration between 3 fintech firms and you go for a project, right? So the eligibility, same thing as what I described before. Singapore-based financial institutions with not more than 200 employees and Singapore-based fintech firms certified by SFA. So how to go about getting the Singapore Fintech Association? We are members of Singapore Fintech Association, so 1 or 2 of my companies are also in the SFA list. So this SFA is an association where you can just join as a trade member and pay a membership fee. I think it's $300 a year, something like that. And then in order to comply with the certification criteria, you will just need to go to SFA and ask them what are the criteria. They will give you a list of questions and they will ask you to fill up certain forms, and then you can comply with those. So if you go through that, then you can get a nice certificate that says you are SFA certified as a fintech associate, a fintech company in Singapore. So basically, those are the qualifying criteria. And secondly, the project eligibility. So the project that you want to do as a institution project has to be deployed for at least 6 months. I think the qualifying criteria is up to a year in Singapore for some cases. And it has to contribute to various things like productivity, efficiency, risk management, operational resilience, or customer service. So the rollout of this 125 million grant is timed exactly with the COVID situation. So right now, the government is trying to put money into worthy recipients who can show that they have the strength to last for the next 6 to 12 months at least, and that this money goes into helping the ecosystem in these various aspects. So you have to belong to one of the categories that I'll describe later. And it cannot be a customized or custom built solution. That means you have to uh, basically get a co-funding grant for something that is more or less an off-the-shelf solution. So cloud services, what are the categories of solutions? Cloud services. So if you subscribe to say AWS or G Suite, these are the types of cloud services that you can get a grant for. Then if you have communication and collaboration tools, so you guys are coming in through this webinar link, that's considered as something like that, or Zoom subscriptions, or GoToMeeting subscriptions, WebEx subscriptions, etc. Trello board, things that can help your organization to collaborate and communicate. So these are considered as part of the institutional projects. Then compliance and KYC tools. So if you are subscribing to KYC providers like Jumio, we ourselves are affiliated with some. So if the participants here are interested in a cost-effective and good solution, you can reach out to us. So compliance KYC, so something like Thomson Reuters Clear Solution, Jumio for digital identity, Yoti if you are from the UK. These are the examples of compliance and KYC tools that will be supported. CRM, customer relationship and engagement tools. So things like Salesforce and things like Zoho, uh, NetSuite. These are the things that can be supported under this grant. Data related services. So basically things like data automation and data analytics, business analytics. These are considered as the data related services. Enterprise level services like HR and accounting systems. There are many flooding the market right now. So a lot of these are free for the next few months and will have significant discounts for the period after. So enterprise level solutions, ERP systems that take care of HR modules and accounting systems. So for example, if you have a zero subscription and you are a qualifying financial institution or fintech company, then you can go and claim your costs for these. Marketing productivity tools like customer sensing, insights generation, etc. So these are related to, like for example, HubSpot, right? So that's something that can help with your inbound marketing. These would be the productivity tools that you can claim for. Then office productivity tools, so things that can allow your staff to collaborate and that can help with productivity, word processing, Microsoft Office, these kinds of suites of software can be subscribed for. Then project management, software development, and testing tools. Basically, all these are online tools that are developed, and subscribers would be able to utilize these to assist with their different capability building, right? Security related solutions. So there are many security systems for the digital space available out there. So a lot of these would be able to qualify as an institution project, and solutions to provide to support with alternative working arrangements. Now, there's another work from home kind of support package right now, where companies can get, I think, $2,000 per headcount, right? So that's something that you can go and apply for, and subject to a maximum of 35 headcount for a qualifying year. So that's basically support for work from home, work-life balance types of arrangements. So these are all the different types of categories for what is considered to be a institution project. It's capped at $120,000 per entity for duration of the scheme, and then it covers the hardware, software, license fees, subscriptions, maintenance, etc., and also professional services in some cases. And qualifying would be expenses that accumulated since 1st February 2020. Next, I'll be describing the pilot projects. So this is where you get together in a group with three participating eligible financial institutions. And again, this is for small FIs only. So the headcount has to be less than 200 staff. So if you're qualified to collaborate on such projects, you can come together to create a pilot that will help in all the categories which I described earlier. So the qualifying solutions must be deployed and used for at least 1 year, must contribute to improvements in the various categories which I mentioned earlier. Cannot and it must belong to one of the categories at least in like I described earlier. And it should not be built from scratch. It should not require heavy infrastructure investments like servers. So same thing, up to 80% co-funding for until end of next year, and capped at 100,000 per participating entity per project. So you have three participating entities in a pilot project. I believe that each of them can get up to 100,000 grant. So funding period is capped at two years from the project implementation. So let me see if there are any questions from anybody. Thanks for answering the poll. So, wow, I'm surprised. Actually, there are a lot of people, 1/3 of the participants say that their business is actually better now than before. Slightly more, I say it's worse, and then about even for same as before. So some have seen a better business upturn, some have seen a downturn, and some are still the same. Okay, that's nice to see. A lot of companies and a lot of entrepreneurs have said that this has basically killed their business, and they are all looking at doing something else right now. Um, okay, and okay, so let me get back to the slides and move on to the next thing to discuss. So MAS Payment Services Act. But before I get into this, so based on the earlier question, are you a qualifying participant if you are under an exemption? So many companies have applied. In fact, 428 companies have applied under the MAS exemptions notice, and they are displayed on the MAS website. And all of these have said that they are going to be applying for MAS Payment Services Act license subsequently. So licenses are in three different categories. One is a standard payment institution. Secondly is a major payment institution. And thirdly would be standalone money changer license holders. In fact, over this period of 2 to 3 months, I've personally been contacted by a few money changers who say that they are intending to shut down because they can't keep up with the expenses, and because they were forced to close their businesses and they couldn't operate. So there is a severe impact on the scene, especially with the safe distancing, social distancing measures that have been implemented all over the world. And of course, in Singapore, we are impacted until the 1st of June as well. So unless you have a general exemption for your business, you are not allowed to operate, except for a few exempted industries and businesses. So there is a big impact. And the good thing about all these grants, a good thing about the licensing is that it's kind of a lull period. So a lot of businesses can focus on getting these licenses in place. And once the world returns to normalcy, then they'll be able to do their business accordingly. So once again, there are three different types of licenses, SPI, MPI, and money changer. So these applications need to come in by the 28th of July because the exemption period of 6 months for the digital payment tokens category is expiring by the 28th of July. For certain other license types, those who have been grandfathered in, meaning that they had the licenses before the Payment Services Act, they automatically qualified as SPI, MPI, or money changers. But subsequently, they would need to have renewals if they are going for different categories as well. And if they are going for different categories, they need to add those, expand their license issuance. So Payment Services Act, there are a few different criteria I will go into that later. All right. Um, okay, so under this slide, since I don't have any other slides for that right now. So basically, Payment Services Act, there are different types of documents that need to be presented. Firstly, you will need to fill up the application form and submit it to MES by 28th of July. And this application form should also have an accompanying legal opinion if you are dealing with digital payment tokens or e-money. The other license categories wouldn't need accompanying legal opinion. Secondly, you would need to have your compliance manual in place. So this compliance manual would be a process flow and how you conduct compliance within your organization, and also your risk policies and privacy policies, etc., etc. So that's another big category of documentation that's required under the Payment Services Act. Under the application form, you will also need to attach your business plan. So your business plan will need to describe what you're intending to do, what are the services and products that you are intending to roll out, and a description of all of these, as well as a financial forecast of what you project your business to be able to do. So MES is pretty strict in terms of adherence to the business plan. So if you get a license that is based on the application that is submitted, your supervising officer from MES will come back to you occasionally and ask questions. Are you hitting your targets? Why are you not doing what you are saying in a business plan, etc. So it's pretty important to really look at your business case and your business plan and make sure that your numbers are matching to what you are intending to do. All right. So MES has a very good reputation worldwide for adherence to the legal structures, and that's why a lot of people want to do business in Singapore. And of course, because of that, they will also take a tough stance and really examine your entire policy and your framework of how you do business and actually how you conduct and operate your business. Another big category of documentation required is your TRM, your Technology Risk Management System. So for those of you who have digital platforms like exchanges, like OTC platforms, anything digital, wallets, APIs, etc., all of these will need to be audited. So a third party approved vendor will have to audit, and the penetration test and security audit tests will have to be presented to MES, and any findings or learnings from those audit reports will have to be taken on board, and your systems need to be improved in order to go through with the licensing application. Now, another big category which is necessary is your organization, as well as your key staff. So the two most important staff would be your CEO or managing director, as well as your chief compliance officer or your compliance head. These are the two key people that MES will always look for. And it is necessary for them to be available. They don't necessarily have to sit in Singapore. They can be overseas, but when they are queried, they will have to give answers. So it's very important that they have a relevant background so that they can qualify, so that your payment services entity can qualify. Other key roles will, of course, need to be submitted as well, but those are not as important. And their organization will undergo an audit by MES, and during this audit of the system and the staff and the policies, they will be asking everyone, right? So whatever you write in your manuals are not just for submission, but also for training and for onboarding by all your staff, right? So these are some key things that need to be looked at if you are one of the applicants for a Payment Services Act license. So the 7 categories for the Payment Services Act are firstly account issuance. So for example, if you operate a business like Revolut or TransferWise and you open accounts for people, or if you operate a digital wallet, so there are many digital wallet operators right now. Even companies like Ledger, Trezor, those are essentially accounts. Then the second category is domestic transfers. So if you allow your users and your ecosystem to transfer money back and forth within Singapore, that's a domestic transfer. Thirdly is overseas cross-border transfer. So the old remittance licenses are considered as the cross-border licenses right now. So if you transfer money internationally, then that's a requirement. The fourth category under the Payment Services Act is the merchant acquisition service. So, for example, if you allow the operation of merchants to API into your services like a payment gateway or as a payment processor, then this is a required subcategory. The fifth element is e-money. So e-money replaces the old Singapore stored value facilities regime. And if you are issuing electronic money or stable coins, so Singapore does regard stable coins like USDT, USDC as e-money, then you would need an e-money license. Then the sixth category is DPT, digital payment tokens. So if you are operating an exchange or an OTC platform, or if you are dealing with digital assets, those are considered as digital payment tokens, but you cannot deal in securities, right? Securities will be another regime under MES. That would be under the registered or recognized market operators, RMO. And the final category of the Payment Services Act is the money changing license. So for money changing licensees, basically is handling physical money and changing them within Singapore. So right now, these are the seven different categories that are under the MES Payment Services Act. We're helping several clients to apply for these, and a lot of projects that we're involved in applying for these. And some of them are actually applying for all the categories. You can actually go to MES and see the 420 applicants. There are some very big names there. And some of the applicants are only going for one category. But there's still some significant confusion, and that we often have questions from applicants or wannabe applicants. So we are happy to answer these, and we are able to provide the full suite of services. Most advisory companies do not have a legal arm as well. But my law firm has rendered many opinions and are able to assist with the legal aspects, the law aspects of the application. So without further ado, I'll move on to the next slide. Any of you who have further questions about the Payment Services Act and the services that we can provide, you can feel free to get in touch with us or ask us for a quote. Next, I'll describe the FinTech regulatory sandbox. So actually, there are three sandbox applicants at the moment. Or rather, if you go to the MES website and you look at the regulatory sandbox, you can see a list of sandbox experiments. So these are the recent ones. Propene Technologies is the newest entrant that has applied for the sandbox. Then you have ICHX Tech, which is basically the sandbox of iStocks. iStocks exited the sandbox on 31st of January this year, and they are now fully licensed to operate a RMO, a recognized market operator. So I believe that they are the second ones after the One Exchange under CapBridge to get the RMO license. What does that mean? It actually means that they are able to operate something like a stock exchange, like SGX or Catalyst, or and it depends on the license type, of course. But if those of you who are interested in this category of licensing, you can go and look at the MES sandbox, and the successful experiment was ICHX. So the regulatory sandbox is basically something instituted by MES to allow innovative solutions to be tested within an environment, as you can see from the overview that I've written here. So let me finish off with the third sandbox applicant. So Insure. So I believe that they went for the insurance aspect of the under the Sandbox Express. They exited the sandbox on 31st of October last year, but they failed to get the license. So I think this is a failure, or they decided not to carry on with the experiment or their business line that they envisaged. So an overview of the regulatory sandbox. What does this mean? The MES regulatory sandbox is to allow FIs, financial institutions, and fintech players to experiment with innovative products and services. So the two categories which are under the Sandbox Express right now are insurance products and recognized market operators. And so within this period of say 6 to 9 months, So for example, ICHX experiment was conducted for 6 months, and subsequently they managed to clear the requirements and they got offered a license. Right. So depending on the experiment, MES will then tell you what is the appropriate regulatory support. They will relax certain requirements, and then you will be subject to supervision, at least reporting every 2 months, and a final report at the end of the experiment. And there will be a restriction on the number of participants, people that you can interact with outside of the sandbox, and there'll be a restriction on the quota or the amount of revenues you can clear within the system. So what happens at the end of it? Either you will be offered a license and you'll be given the requirements. So if you apply for it, MES will allow you to carry on and you can get the license, or you have to stop offering the financial product or service that you envisaged or that you were experimenting with. So there are two different types of applications. One is the sandbox and the other is the sandbox express. So under the sandbox, basically any kind of experiment that fits can be applied for. And Sandbox Express, like I mentioned earlier, has two main categories that you can go for: recognized market operator and the um, insurance. So in the Sandbox Express, which I'll describe right now, the timeline is basically apply a pre-application. You submit an application form to MES. Then that's the application stage, which is the first 21 days. And why it's called Sandbox Express is because MES commits to getting a response to you within 21 days. So for a lot of applicants and business owners who are interested in licensing, they always ask, what's the time frame, right? We can't really force the regulators to say anything, except in the Sandbox Express regime, they committed to 21 days turnaround time. So within 21 days, MES will then say, okay, you are suitable, and then lay down the rules. Or they will say, Sandbox is not suitable for you, please go and try something else. Um, Either go for the full license or drop the idea or try another category. Then the next stage is called the evaluation stage, where your experiment parameters, your application will be considered by MES, and then they will consider during this next 21 days, and they will get back to you and say whether it's suitable or not. So if it's deemed approved, then you will go on to the experimentation stage, which is 6 to 12 months, depending on the sandbox parameters that are provided. So over the course of the last 4 years, where the sandbox has been in effect since 2016, there has been over 10 companies. I think the number is between 10 to 20 who have applied for sandbox, and most of them managed to get the license. Those who wanted to carry on have carried on, but some of them have dropped out, like you have seen in my sharing earlier. Insure has dropped out. So what happens during this experimentation stage? So within this period, you will then interact with your ecosystem, a limited ecosystem of up to 100 participants, and then there will be a limit on the amount of turnover and revenues that you can go through. And subsequently, every 2 months, you have to provide a report. Anytime that MES sees something wrong or gives a directive, you have to comply and amend. And then at the end of it, either they decide to extend your sandbox and observe further, or at your final report at the end of 6 months or 9 months or 12 months, then they will decide whether to issue you the license offer, or they will say, no, you have been rejected. All right. So at that point, if you've been rejected or you fail to take up the offer of a license, then it's considered that the sandbox has failed. If you have been offered and you decide to take it up and you comply with the requirements, then you can proceed to deploy and you have a full license. So those who are interested in this regime, feel free to contact us. We have experience with the application for a few clients in this aspect, and we'll be happy to look at your business case. So basically, why do you go through a Sandbox Express? So the most common reason that we see right now is there are a lot of companies and businesses and projects that want to do an STO platform, a securities token exchange, right? So something like Harbor or Open Finance or T0. So these are the well-known ones from the US, from Canada, that have successfully launched their STO platforms. And those who are bullish on the digital asset space believe that security tokens and digital tokens fractionalization will be the next stage. So those who want to get in early on this space, on this into this industry, are applying for licenses. Now they can either go for the straight RMO license or wait for Singapore to come out with the new RMO regime, or go for the Sandbox Express. So invariably, we will advise our clients go for Sandbox Express because the regulatory bar is much lower. The entrance will be assessed on a much lower standard for entry, and you have a period of 6 to 12 months where you are free to make mistakes and where you will get the supervision of MES, um, and work within a controlled environment. So at the end of the period, you will then be offered a license if you are compliant, and if the experiment is deemed to be a success. So this is a faster route rather than going through the full RMO application, which has much more stringent requirements and a much higher level of supervision. So this is a prime aspect, a prime reason why applicants go for Sandbox Express. So the two categories which are under Sandbox Express right now are insurance broking and recognized market operators. And previously there was a third category, but that category has now been subsumed into the Payment Services Act, after the industry dialogue between MES and industry participants. So right now, this is the main interest in terms of Sandbox, as you can see from or as from what you have heard earlier when I described the applicants for Sandbox. So basically, one was an RMO, the second was an insurance broking service. Okay, so let me move on. Now Q&A time. So we have some time for questions and answers, if any, from the floor. Feel free to click on the chat and type in whatever questions that you have. I'll be happy to answer them. Right. So let me just end off right now if there's nobody asking any further questions. Uh, and let me show you my contact details. So right now, if you have any queries in relation to any of these services that we provide, like I said, we provide end-to-end application support for any of the MES licenses. These are some of the topical ones that we are working on right now and that we have seen a higher volume of interest from clients. And we are different from many advisory firms because we actually help clients end to end if they require any aspects. So we can help with the advisory, with the business structuring, the business plan writing, of course the application form itself, any legal aspects and opinions that are required, as well as the technology framework, the risk policies, the compliance policies, etc. Right, so I have a question regarding Hazard tokens, which I'll take separately after this. And feel free to contact me at the contact information that I've provided right now. Right. So we have, okay. Okay, I don't see any other questions right now pertaining to this topic. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And anyone who's interested in the slides or in getting the recording of this webinar, this will be provided as well. So just feel free to get in touch with us. Our contact information is here, or if you have come through some other links or through one of our business development managers, then you can contact them as well. Okay, thank you everyone. Have a great day and stay safe, and do look into applying for the grants which are being given by the government. Right, thank you. Bye-bye.